Welcome to the 28th Massachusetts. Today, we will go over how to roll your cartridges. Much of the information provided here came from the excellent Round Ball to Rimfire Volume 1 by the late Dean Thomas. It is a must for anyone interested in all things bullets, cartridges, and arsenals. We also recommend you head over to Brent Gibbons' amazing YouTube channel, Paper Cartridges. His content and the information he provides is a hobby standard and second to none. His 2009 article on the subject is a must-read. For those who don't want to make your own cartridges, Brent is your go-to for all manner of period and accurate cartridges. Links in the description. The techniques shown here are personal preference, and you will see some variation across the hobby. Everyone has their opinions, but we work hard to base ours on period sources. Just remember, rolling cartridges is the adult equivalent of building a model ship and blowing it up with a firecracker. Half your work will be burned up, and the other half will be litter. But nothing beats the look and feel of an accurate cartridge at an event. So here we go. But before we get into it, some quick basics. How did we get here? Paper cartridges would have been familiar in 1861, having been standardized in 1835, but what about the bullet? We know the impact Claude Monet had, as he is credited with the design of the first, quote, ball with a wedge, though he was hardly the only person working on new bullets at the time. However, during testing at Harper's Ferry, it was found, quote, the balls of this kind, made according to the descriptions of those used in France, did not succeed in our experiments, as the cup Monet had designed in the rear of the bullet often cracked the bullet. It was James Burton, acting master armorer at Harper's Ferry, who finalized the bullet we all know. Quote,
Mr. Burton hit upon the expedient of hollowing out the bottom of the bullet and making the edges thin enough to be forced outwards by the action of the gas at the instant of the explosion of the charge, thus causing it to fill the grooves and receive its rotary motion.
However, Burton turned his back on the United States twice. First by going to England to become the chief engineer at the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield in 1855, and then again when he was commissioned a lieutenant colonel in the Virginia State Militia in 1861 and put in charge of all Confederate armories. Hence why his name was likely dropped from what we now refer to as the Monet ball, even though it is more Burton than Monet. The United States selected the .58 caliber as the standard size bullet prior to the war, but why? Testing at Harper's Ferry in Springfield noted, a weapon lighter in weight of piece and ammunition, one possessing less recoil and greater penetration and accuracy, can be had by reducing the caliber to either .54 or .6 of an inch. A size between these two is thought would be the most suitable for a uniform caliber. However, many federal regiments, to include the 28th Massachusetts, used the .577 imported Enfields, with over 400,000 in federal use, making it the second most common arm behind the .58 caliber Springfield series. The different caliber rifles led to the need for different ammunition, since the standard .58 caliber bullet would not work in the Enfield. To address this, General James Ripley, Chief of Ordnance from 1861 to 1863, took steps to address this by working with the arsenals to standardize ammunition for use in both the Springfield and Enfield. For instance, in July of 1861, General Ripley wrote to the Washington Arsenal and noted,
many of the troops being armed with Enfield muskets, caliber .577, it is necessary that ammunition should be prepared for these arms. The cartridges will be made in the same way as those for our own rifle muskets, with the same charge of powder, and the ball like ours in all respects, except the diameter, which must be .574 inch.
Even so, the arsenals were not uniform in their production of ammunition, producing .574, .577, .57, and .58 caliber bullets. What did all these cartridges look like? The fancy Enfield cartridges we see at events wouldn't have been normal, usual, or general, or NUG in federal units. For federal use, cartridges were constructed in the same standard paper thread method, however there was variation. As an example, we can see different colors of thread being used for these .69 caliber round ball cartridges, with pink and white, red and white, buff, and dark brown being represented. We can see more variance across the construction of these .69 caliber buck and ball cartridges as well. So while the majority of cartridge paper was natural brown or tan, some cartridges did show some variance, in this instance being light blue. All this is to say, your cartridges do not need to be perfect or uniform. The originals were not. They were made across no less than 7 federal and 2 state arsenals and more than 15 private contractors, in bulk, by women and children who were paid by the amount they produced, thus driving quantity over quality, and were constructed with the materials on hand. We take a lot of time and care in making sure each one of these is perfect and constructed the same. However, most cartridges we make today would probably be very impressive to those who used them 160 years ago, and likely too uniform and too well constructed to what was issued to the federal soldier. For cartridge types, we are going to make 2. The 1855 type and the commonly seen 1862 type. The paper used during that time is no longer available, so modern substitutes must be found. Light, natural brown wrapping or painting masking paper is a fine substitute. You don't want to go too thick, as it will make folding and tearing the cartridge difficult. However, that happened back in the day. This was an actual complaint from September 1861.
The paper of the wrapper is rather too strong, as it is found to require great exertion and consequent delay on the part of the soldier to tear it away from the bullet.
For string, we will use 3-ply, unwaxed, uncolored linen thread, but any natural string will be acceptable, as noted before, to include colorized versions. For the 1855 type cartridge, we will also use tissue paper. Per the regulation, a child was expected to make 800 of these in 12 hours, so let's get to work. The first type of cartridge we will make is the more well-known 1862 type cartridge. This type involves 1 template and 1 type of paper. The template we are using is from 4th Armory. The name 1862 type cartridge isn't a period name. The Army published an updated ordnance manual in 1861, but it wasn't ready for distribution until 1862. Among other changes, it updated the guidance on cartridge construction, hence the unofficial term 1862 type cartridge. The previous guidance being issued in 1855, resulting in what we will refer to as the 1855 type cartridge, which we will make next. While it is incredibly easy to make your own templates, we recommend checking out 4th Armory, who have an amazing selection of metal templates for period cartridges. If you are making a lot of these, and especially if you're using a blade versus scissors, we found that paper and even wood templates will get cut up. The metal ones from 4th Armory are durable and accurate. They also send properly sized dowels, so you don't have to worry about the diameter. Link in the description. As you can see, you can cut as many tubes as you want by simply folding over the paper. Here we start by making 2, but to make it faster, I fold the paper over multiple times and can cut up to 10 at a time. Remember, there will be 2 identical pieces of paper for each cartridge, so make sure you cut an even number. While you can use the same dowel for both tubes, I found a little trick to make it easier. I use a wooden dowel, 0.55 inches, from Home Depot for the inner tube, and the 0.58 inch diameter 3D printed dowel that comes from 4th Armory for the outer tube. The first step is to make the inner tube or powder holder. Orient the paper with a point on the left and pointed towards you, then take your smaller wooden dowel with a flat end and roll your cartridge. I like to put a little bit of glue here, but you don't have to. Once rolled, pull the dowel down slightly so you have a lip of paper. A setup like this works wonders, and I use it to make cartridges in arsenal packs. I got this one from the fantastic Mike Comer, another hero of the hobby, but you can easily make your own. For making the cartridges, you need a choker and something to hold the dowel. You can use a dedicated choker or the thread itself. If you're using a choker, I found the guts of 550 cord work best. When using twine, it wears out and snaps after a while. When you choke, make sure you put your finger where the rose will be to help center it. For tying the thread, you can either use 2 half hitches per the original directions or a square knot. Here is a square knot. I find there is less waste when using a square knot, which adds up, but either knot is fine. Cut the string and flatten the top. To do the 2 half hitches, loop the string right over left once and twice, and place the second loop behind the first. Slide it over the rose, pull tight, clip the strings, and flatten. The outer tube is the same process, but I use a thicker dowel from 4th Armory. Either way, make sure that you use the bullet-shaped end. We glue, we roll, making sure you use the bullet-shaped end. Make the paper lip. Choke using the choker thread or the thread you will use to tie the cartridge. And tie. Here we use a square knot. Flatten down the rows as before, and you're done. Note that originals did have different sized roses, so some variation is fine. Next is assembly. Take your outer tube, the one with the pointy end, and 2 foam peanuts. I have used toilet paper before to simulate the bullet, but I found that 2 to 3 compressed biodegradable foam peanuts packed down are the same size as a 57 or 58 caliber bullet. Note there is a little bit of variance in peanut size, so you may need to adjust. I am also mindful of the waste this hobby produces, so knowing the peanuts will decompose is a plus. I go 1 peanut, 2 peanut, then compress hard, making sure I have my hand over the top so as not to rip through it. Now take your inner tube, place it on the smaller dowel with a flat side, and place it in the outer tube and compress. There we go. That's all there is to it. Here we will do a size comparison of 3 large compressed peanuts and an original 58 caliber bullet for my relic collection. As you'll see, a perfect match. Next we'll do the 1855 type cartridge. This type of cartridge has 3 parts of 3 different sizes with 2 types of paper, so you can see why it was discontinued and replaced by the simpler 1862 type version. It's lesser seen at events, but appropriate for early war impressions or issue from Watervliet Arsenal up until 1864, until they were called out for not changing to the new type. St. Louis Arsenal was also known to produce 1855 type cartridges even mid-war. To make it, first you'll get your larger stencil and cut out the shape for your outer wrapper. Again, you can cut multiple layers by folding over the paper as many times as you want. Next we'll make the internal stiffener for the powder cup, from the same type of paper as the outer wrapper. Use the rectangle template. A common complaint about the 1855 type with the small powder cup was the powder would end up escaping out of the top and ending up between the paper layers, or worse yet, on the bullet getting stuck to the lubrication. In the 1862 type cartridge, the inner or powder tube protrudes past the external tube, thus eliminating the issue of powder getting on the bullet. Lastly, take your tissue paper and the smaller trapezoid template and cut out the powder cup. This is where a sharp blade is important, since a dull blade will rip the thin tissue paper instead of cutting through it. To assemble, lay the tissue paper with the point on the left side and pointing at you. Place your rectangular stiffener on the right, flush with the top, making sure to have it overlap slightly on the right side of the tissue paper. This will ensure there's enough tissue paper to fold over in the next step. Roll your powder cup on the dowel flat side. With the paper wrapped around the dowel, fold over the tissue paper, starting at the seam and work your way around. Use a little bit of glue, push down the ends to make a cup. I'll make 50 to 100 of these at a time and put them aside. The outer wrapper is made exactly the same way as the 1862 type cartridge, however the size of the paper is a little smaller. Make the outer tube, pack in the peanuts, and compress the same way as before. Then we insert the powder cup. There is a question I see pop up from time to time, which is, if you are at an event where you can ram, do you ram the foam peanut? I've seen some people say yes, but I would say no. Why? Because it will burn and melt. Best case, you have melted slag at the bottom of your barrel. Worst case, you risk shooting what is essentially a flaming marshmallow at people. Either way, outside of paper, we don't recommend ramming anything down your barrel when you are at a hoot and shoot. To charge the cartridge, you can pick up the super dirty Reenactor grade powder from most anywhere gunpowder is sold, but I buy mine directly from Graf. Next, you need a powder measurer of your choice and set it to 60 grains. To compensate for powder loss in transit mid-war, the Ordnance Bureau changed the charge to 65 grains, but we stick with 60. In goes 60 grains of powder. Tap it down gently. Fold over the top and pinch the sides to make a U shape, and fold over each one to make the tab. Now we'll compare it to an original round. Next, we'll make arsenal packs. We'll cut out a rectangle. I found the size by trial and error, and it isn't exactly the measurements described in the regulation, but it's enough to cover the 10 cartridges. We find center and stamp. Later in the war, the arsenal stopped using stamps, so there's no need to stamp for late war events. But if you like using your hard-to-find stamp, no one will say anything. Next, we take our jig. This is the one I got from Mike Comer, but you can easily make your own. We line up the paper so the rectangle is horizontal, press down and crease the edges. Now we line up the cartridges, alternating directions. Five in the first row, and 5 in the second. We'll add 3 Williams patent blue cartridges for good measure, and a little bit of bling. Arsenal packs also came with a tube of 12 percussion caps. I don't add them to my packs, but you can. Just take an empty tube, fill it up, twist the end, and add it to the end of your cartridges. Now we fold the paper like a Christmas present. It is slow going, and the guys who make these professionally can do it much faster and make them look much better, but we get by. This is not necessary, and you can just keep the loose cartridges in a poke sack. In fact, ammo is sometimes issued loose, but nothing beats having some nice arsenal packs in your living history display or in your knapsack. As noted before, there are multiple arsenals making cartridges of different calibers. Each arsenal had their own stamp with its name and the date of manufacturer for their respective packs. Stamps are hard to come by, and if you're making these yourself, 1 or 2 stamps will suit you well. However, if you are going authentic and you are using ammunition boxes, you'll want to make sure the location and dates of your packs and box match, and the dates selected are appropriate for the event you are doing. For instance, 1864 packs would not be present during an Antietam event. You'll also want to research which arsenal was most likely providing the ammunition to the unit you are portraying. For example, not all arsenals produced 69 caliber buck and ball, and the boxes for each caliber were marked as such. For instance, I use the Allegheny Arsenal stamp because it matches the ammunition box I had made and stenciled myself. Ammunition boxes came in all manners of shapes, with the arsenals not always following the regulations of such. Research is needed on your part to make sure your stencils and paint, which can be found in the Ordnance Manual, match what you are going for. Once your arsenal pack is folded up, pull it out, have your string ready, and wrap it up. Cut the excess string and you're done. Here's my fantastic 1862 CS Storms New York cartridge box from Kerry Davidson, and this is where the arsenal packs go. So that ends our journey into the world of cartridges. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you are in the Virginia, Maryland, DC area and are looking for a Union unit, you think about joining the 20th Massachusetts. We'd like to thank Brett Gibbons for his help in making this video. Fa-ah-bala.